right, there we go. All right. So, good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for making a decision. I know you're all decision makers. You decided to come here this morning. But this course is, session is generative AI for, decision makers. All right, so what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about that wonderful thing, that buzzword we've all been hearing about, generative AI. But how do we use this in making a decision for, business value? Is this something we want to add to our business? This is not technical. This is one of those 100 series. This is very introductory. Don't worry. We will get into technical because it's not a reinvent if we don't. Now, my name is Scott Friend. I am, as you can tell by this accent, I am from Australia. Now, I'm originally an American, but I've been in Australia for 7 years since I joined AWS. And I am a technical trainer. I'm wearing this shiny gold jacket because it is just so cold here in the desert. No, it's because I've actually got all the AWS certifications. Okay, I geek out on the tech. I'm sorry. I promise you I won't go deep tech on you here. But if you do want to talk to me about certs, just find me. You can see the bling. I'll be around. All right, so I'm not alone today. I'm going to be joined by Stefan from Canal Plus. He came all the way over from France to be here with you guys. So I'm really excited for him to be able to share the story that he and Canal Plus have gone through utilizing generative AI and working with our training and certification team as well, other trainers such as myself. Of course, I wasn't teaching from Australia to France. All right, so that's what we're going to do today. Hopefully you are in the right room. You're ready to go. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, introduction to generative AI. Yeah, it's been like the buzzword for the last year and a bit. So let's make sure we're all on the same page of what it is. Let's not make any assumptions. Right, generative AI. What is it? How does it work? Right. Then we're going to put some use cases into play. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to implement something for a business, if it doesn't drive business value, it's a waste. So let's understand why we can apply generative AI and make positive business outcomes. All right, then technical fundamentals, like I said, it's not a reinvent unless we get into some sort of technical issues. And okay, so we're not going to go super deep. We're not going to be doing algorithms and all of that, don't worry. But we're going to get the vocabulary of those key components that we need to know about when we're talking about generative AI. You've probably heard the buzzwords, foundation models, tokens. All right, we'll explain what those are. And by the way, when we get to that section, I'm going to give you a little take-home task. Just challenge yourself with that take-home task. Right? Spoiler alert. All right. Then we're going to actually figure out if we are decision makers, right? If we want to implement a generative AI project, how would we go about it? So we'll talk about those use cases. We'll come up with a hypothetical problem. We'll give some ideas of some use cases, apply those use cases in this hypothetical situation, and then we'll figure out an implementation plan. Okay, so that plan on how we're going to do this involves something extremely important. So please, I know you're tempted. There's a lot of competing things going on, but please wait to the very end of the section here because at the end, we're going to talk about responsibility in your AI models. How do we make sure that we use them responsibly and we're doing the right thing? All right, so I'm sorry it's at the end, but you'll get there. I'm sure you will. And then the more important thing is hearing how Stefan and Canal Plus had applied that generative AI, and they're doing the responsible utilization of it. So, all right, hopefully you guys are all excited. I surely am. It's only like 2 in the morning, my home time. All right, so again, thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to start with that whole, what is generative AI? Well, AI, artificial intelligence. Okay, I guess we can get into philosophical discussions. What is intelligence? Is it thought? Oh, all right, we can get into some René Descartes. That was French, I think, I'm not sure. We could talk about existentialism. No, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to talk about this concept, artificial intelligence, as how we utilize machines to help us make better decisions. Not necessarily better, but give them the information that they need to help us be more productive, really. All right, so let's talk about machine learning as let's call it the foundational aspect of what we now think of as our artificial intelligence world. Machine learning, okay, we got a bunch of stuff on the slide. I'm just going to talk about it as you look at those slides, right? So machine learning takes data sets, processes those data sets, looks for patterns, looks for causal relationships, And with those causal relationships, it makes a prediction. So it's not like going to a psychic and a crystal ball and just hoping for the right answer. It's using anecdotal causal relationship. So, okay, you can tell this accent. I am originally from America. So I'm thinking of a very, very common prediction case here in America. Has anybody ever heard of Punxsutawney Phil? Yeah, Bill Murray? Okay, no, he wasn't Punxsutawney Phil, but there was a movie called Groundhog Day, right? Groundhog Day is where they get this little groundhog out of the ground in Pennsylvania, and if it sees its shadow, it predicts whether or not we're going to have an early spring. Okay, just go ahead, look it up yourself. Punxsutawney Phil has only about a 40% accuracy rate. But all we're looking at is, hey, was it a sunny day on the 2nd of February? Is that really enough data for us to determine if a weather pattern is going to change? But anecdotally, it's been about 100 and some years, people have been using this traditional aspect of Punxsutawney Phil. All right, this is not what you want to lead your business with, I hope. Okay, now if you want to use your business of selling Punxsutawney Phil merchandise, whole other story. But don't use Punxsutawney Phil's prediction to determine, hey, are we going to have early spring? No, that's not going to be useful for you. Okay, so utilizing machine learning, we can take large amounts of known data, run it through processing, because computer processing is getting so much more powerful nowadays, and we can run it through and create these causal relationships. All right, now we can create prediction models, and that's all it is a prediction. We want high likelihood of our prediction to be accurate. Okay, that's machine learning. Okay. Now, yes, we are Amazon Web Services. That first word in our name is Amazon. All right, so Amazon, most people know of as an e-commerce retail outlet. All right, the world's largest bookseller, one might say. All right, yeah, I remember being an early adopter back in the 90s. So when did Amazon start using machine learning? Does anybody have an idea when Amazon started utilizing machine learning? Anyone yell out an answer? Here in 2009, I heard somewhere, well, let's go ahead and take a look at this next slide, right? 2001, yeah. Now, for those of you that are wondering, Amazon's been around since 96, so that's only 5 years into Amazon's time. Yeah, why? Well, personalization recommendations. So this is one of those things like I go online shopping for an item and it might say, well, people that bought this item also bought these other items. You may be interested in it. Look, you guys are business decision makers and you know what product placement is. You know about those auxiliary add-on sales, and that's all this was, right? Amazon said, how do we look at a pattern? Hey, these people are buying this, and maybe they'd be interested in this too, so let's tell them about it. Hey, that's like putting the tissues and the decongestants right next to each other at the store, right? So, hey, that was 2001. But with the large e-commerce platform, it took a lot of data to understand what that model looked like. All right, so 2001, let's see, we are in 2004. Well, that's 23 years ago. Yes, over 2 decades. That is, well, old enough to be in these casinos over here, right? So machine learning is not in its infancy by any means. It's well on its way to adulthood. All right, so look along this timeline. Not every one of these is really that interesting or notable, but I'm gonna point out one of the ones that actually just maybe in the last couple weeks, I've used at home and said, well, all right, Alexa. You guys, if you're familiar with Alexa, you know, that personal voice assistant, Alexa has been around for 10 years. Yeah, my daughter was like, why does Alexa not like answer what I want? I said, well, she's your age, you know, she's getting sassy, right? No, Alexa's been around for over 10 years, just barely, but over 10 years now. And we're interacting with a voice chat bot, and it uses neurolinguistic approach. Ooh, neurolinguistic. Okay, I told you I'm not gonna get too technical. I'm not going there. I won't, I promise. But it really is forms of machine learning, and we start using that on a day-to-day basis. We are using various forms of artificial intelligence, machine learning, that we don't even think about. We have them all the time. They're happening around us. We just never gave them the labels. Now, we're labeling it, and we're empowering you to apply it in your business. All right. So I'm now going to focus on the far end of that slide. Well, I guess it's that way over there. 2003, 2004. right? So Code Whisperer was a coding assistant tool. And you notice I used the word was, because Code Whisperer has been replaced by Amazon Q developer. So I come from a tech background, okay. But coding is a lot of copy and pasting, searching for processes. Oh, somebody else has already solved this problem. Let me take that, let me copy and paste it, let me make that mine. Now, using a coding assistant is a really powerful enablement tool for us to accelerate our development. Amazon Q, well, it started as Whisper, and Amazon Q, then Q for Business. I mean, these are wrappers to help make this a more consumable product for us. All right, so we're here at re:Invent. This week, we're hearing a lot of new announcements about things. There's a lot of extensions into the Amazon Q. All right, this is the emerging area, but it's not bleeding edge by any means. So how do we choose to determine, is this right for our business? How are we going to put this into our business model? That's what we're going to talk about here, but still a little more context of what is that machine learning? What is that generative AI? How is generative AI a part of this machine learning? Well, we got the AI part. AI involves machine learning. So let's look at this little diagram here. All right, so we've got the rings of Saturn. And these rings of Saturn, well, just the inclusive diagrams, really. Artificial intelligence is the field that we would be referring to here. Well, generative artificial intelligence, or Gen AI, as everybody says, is, well, the deepest layer here. Machine learning, as we said, it's a prediction model based on causal relationship of large amounts of known data and patterns that we're able to detect from it. So it's not exactly deterministic programming, but it could be decision trees, it could be classifications, but it's a prediction model. Deep learning. Oh, by the way, this is the last year Deep Racer is available here at re:Invent. Deep Racer had a little camera on this device, and it was like a remote control car, and you would program a deep learning model. Well, what is deep learning? It's a neural network. What's neural network? It's the way the brain works, more or less. So here's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to turn back to, my daughter. I'll bring her back into the story here. When my daughter was learning to speak, my daughter would think a star was called an uppa. If you're wondering, why would she call it an uppa? It's from the song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So she associated the sounds, the song, to this imagery. So she thought whenever she saw a star, it was an uppa. Well, as she grew older and had more context, and more data, she had a better relationship, and she was able to flesh that out and learn, oh, it's actually called a star. Now, she doesn't call it an uppa anymore. Good, because nobody would have understood her. But she was able to adapt based on the data that she had coming into her senses. And essentially, that's what deep learning neural networks does, is it evolves the data patterns that you have feeding into it, and it helps make those more robust. So it's an improvement. Okay. Now, what about generative AI? Okay, that, I'll admit, is a bit mysterious. When I say it's a bit mysterious, it's even more so like what we do as humans. But it utilizes that neural network in a way, but what it does is it starts with unlabeled data. So instead of those data sets that we know what we have going into it to create these causal relationships, we say, hey, I've just got a whole bunch of data. Here's a whole bunch of stimuli. Here's a whole bunch of inputs. Go figure it out. And by the way, it takes a ton of compute power to figure that stuff out. And when we get to that technical part, we're going to talk about what happens to make that work. But generative AI interprets large amounts of data and figures out how to classify that data to apply it within its modeling process, rather than us having to label it. Okay, so that gives us better flexibility and robustness with that learning process. Cool. So, yeah, generative AI, I told you what it is from a more technical perspective right there, but what is it from a pragmatic perspective? Well, rather than just using it as a prediction model, as we did with our machine learning, we now use it to create context. In other words, instead of just saying, well, what do you think this house value will be in 3 years? Give me a number, or hey, is this a hot dog or is this a hamburger? Classifications. No, we're just saying, hey, tell me a story. And it uses what it knows to create context. That context involves, well, creativity. How does a machine be creative? again, it used those patterns that it determined to say, oh, this is what is a common pattern. Now we can use that to create conversations, stories, well, imagery, videos, audio. Well, and what I like is code, right? Not that it thinks for us, it finds the patterns from this large corpus of data and says, hey, this is what I think you want, and I'm going to not just give you one thing, I'm going to fill this out and tell you a whole story for you. All right, so it gives us more than just a prediction. It gives us something useful. All right, now we'll talk just a little bit about Amazon Q. Okay, this is not an Amazon Q session, but Amazon Q is a product that we have that helps you get started into some of this generative AI. So we have Q Business, Q Developer, Q in QuickSight, Q in Connect, Q in Supply Chain, Q everywhere. All right, so all right, think about those James Bond movies. What was Q for? To give James Bond what he needs. That's basically what Q does for us. Gives us what we need for it. Now, this week we're hearing some extra features added into Q. Great. Q Developer, as I said, it's going to be one of those things, coming from my coding background, comes from one of those things that it helps us as a code assistant. So let's take a quick look at what code generation might look like. I know, I can't get the geek out of me, I'm sorry. All right, so this is just a quick little sample. Don't try to worry about the code, but it's a code reference. And what we do is we say, hey, this is copy and pasted code, basically, from somewhere. Q says, I've seen that code before somewhere. I think I know what that code is. Oh yeah, it has this MIT license to it. You might want to put a reference to that MIT license in your code. Okay, so that's what we see on the screen if you're looking at the details there. But more importantly, think about Q Developer as that tool that lets a junior developer try to create some sort of new code and have to, well, take a senior developer off their day job to say, hey, can you do me a code review? Can you come over here and coach me and let me know, how am I doing with this? Now, I used to be, well, both a junior and a senior developer, and I enjoyed the interaction. Don't get me wrong, it's great because you can learn from one another. You can learn those perspectives. But if we're looking at productivity, the productivity comes along because we can have that automated process. Instead of the junior developer having to disrupt the senior developer and say, hey, how do I do this? You can utilize generative AI through Amazon Q Developer to give you, well, tips. Oh, here's a typical pattern. You might want to do this. Or spending 20 minutes searching the internet for a solution that you're going to copy and paste that wasn't even applicable to your use case. Or the tangent of you spending another hour going down those other trails that weren't relevant. Yeah, so we get the answer quick. So we found from early studies, Amazon Q Developer preview stage, participants 27% more likely to complete their tasks rather than getting discouraged and walk away and say, I can't figure this out. Well, and also 57% faster than those that were not using Q, right? So it's productivity right here. This is really a productivity hack. How can we be more productive in what we do? And yet we're using generative AI to do that. All right, so those common use cases that we're going to look at. All right, go ahead, take a look at these use cases, and I'm going to categorize these 4 use cases. There is no specific priority or order to these. These are just 4. They can be mixed and matched. So I'm going to start with my personal favorite. You guys are probably wondering which one I'm going to start with. Creativity. Why? I'm a techie. I'm not creative. So for me to use one of these tools to help me with creativity, with brainstorming, it is amazing, right? It helps me get through that mental block. Creativity is just one of those things, it's just not natural for me personally, so it's great for me to have a tool such as generative AI to do creativity work. Now, we already talked about Amazon Q Developer helping with productivity. So creativity, productivity. Well, we got our 2 other bookends there. Let's talk about user experience. Like if the user is not having a positive experience, well, then that's not good, right? We want to encourage that our users are having a more positive experience. So how do we make a more robust engagement with our users? Well, we can use chat agents to give interactions with our users. You guys remember those early days of voice assistants where press 1 for this, press 2 for that. And if you don't know which button to push, well, just hold on the line. Well, then it evolved to, hey, speak what your request is. And that request led to routing. If we can get our customers through a call center, and yes, through Connect we can do these things. If we can get them through a call center and that experience is nearly seamless and conversational, that is a great experience for our customer, right? So customer experience, I think that's a really important one. Again, my favorite is connectivity because it's valuable to me. But we're business decision makers. What's valuable to a business? Our customer's experience. But also the other bookend, your business processes, right? How do we improve all of your business processes? Well, for most people that have gone through management programs or anything else, they've probably studied like lean engineering or lean design. And well, if you're trying to figure that in some sort of manufacturing scale, it's not the easiest thing. You know, the constraints theory, okay. But if we can apply machine learning or generative AI approaches to our workflows, to our production capabilities, or to, well, let's just call them repetitive tasks that just are time consuming. These all help us with operations of businesses. All right, so we got a lot of different use cases. Now, of these use cases, they can be applied to various industry verticals. Of course they can. Now, we'll go and talk about a couple different industries. Healthcare. All right, in healthcare, I'm just gonna call out one of these as my interesting one, is medical imaging. Like, having a radiologist review an X-ray, a CT scan, whatever, looking for indicators, they need a lot of experience, a lot of training. And, well, they can make mistakes. They're human. They can misinterpret something. Having a machine-learned model that improves upon itself, it can make mistakes too. I'm gonna say it can make mistakes too. But it can improve the efficiency, and when something is not within a certainty level, it can then go to a human for a second process. And I think we can get more information quicker to our patients. So I like that one. All right, yeah, life sciences, drug discoveries, well, I just don't want to talk about what we had to deal with about 4 years ago. So let's just skip over that one. Financial services, we talk here about, well, things like debt collection. You know, that process of debt collection could be very off-putting. And at the end of the day, you're trying to recover whatever you can from your customers. You might need to be a little bit more empathetical. Can a machine be empathetical? Well, not really, but it can learn the context of what a more well-received debt notice might look like and might be able to help write those notices in a way that resonates better with a debtor. Okay, so these are 3 industries. We got a couple more industries to talk about. All right, manufacturing. Oh, well, this goes right into that idea of the lean manufacturing approach. Hey, look at our workflows. Look at our process optimizations. Retail, okay, Amazon's got a little something there. But virtual try-ons. Yeah, you've probably been seeing this on a couple websites nowadays where you look at a product, a piece of clothing, and some of them will actually let you put a picture of yourself and show you what that clothing might look like on you. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's not just a Photoshop there, but it gives you the idea of what that experience is without you having to, well, order it, find out it's not good, and return it. Sure, sizing is still an issue, but it gives you an idea. All right, media and entertainment. I'm not gonna talk about those. I've got Stefan here to talk about those for us, and I'm really excited to hear how Canal Plus has done that. Well, okay, we've already talked about that, but I'm really excited for you to hear about it, to be honest. So I'll let Stefan do that here in a little while. All right, so we talked about some use cases. We've applied those into some industries. So now let's get a little bit more into what are the layers of generative AI. We talked about Q, and I said Q is a consumable approach of it. It's very accessible. Okay, so that's kind of a layer above our foundation model as a service. But Bedrock is that foundational model. We'll talk about foundational models in the tech section. I promise you we will. And you can also build your own models. And this is using a service like SageMaker. Okay, now we're getting deeper into the tech. You see we're going down the layers. So I'm going to put less and less emphasis on these. All right, and look, if you want to actually do things yourself, which there's no reason not to, other than having the skill set, you can use customized processors that are intended for those purposes. So the Trainium and the Inferentia. So we've got things depending on where you are with your depth to make that fit. Okay, that's enough about those services. let's talk about putting this to practice. Okay, so we've got use cases. We've got an idea what generative AI is. Let's now create a hypothetical situation. You guys are decision makers. That was the name of the class. So you came in here, you're decision makers. You've made a decision already. Now, let's pretend you are working for a shoe company. Yeah, okay. Why a shoe company? Because it's in the slides, that's why. Okay, so you are tasked with, well, a product launch. How would you go about that? Well, there's a whole lot of work to do with it. So let's think about those use cases that we had. There were 4 categories of use cases I think we had. So we had creativity, my favorite. Remember creativity? That falls under content generation. Code generation. Well, that's productivity. That's employee productivity. All right, remember the bookends? We have our customer experience. That sounds like the question and answer. Experience for our customers? Let them interact with our systems through a Q&A system. All right, so we had business process was our 4th of those. Content summarization. What do we mean by content summarization? Well, let's look at it more. Content summarization, sorry, we may have gotten analyst reports, right? Industry reports from analysts that they're constantly monitoring what's happening. Like those reports tend to be very, very wordy and very exhaustive. So you may have business analysts within your organization that review those, interpret those, and maybe summarize that and create you some recommendations. All right, you could feed in this massive report with a prompt. All right, so prompt. That's one of our vocabulary words we're going to be talking about. Prompt is the way that you give an input into this generative AI approach for it to generate you an output or a response, right? So we're going to give it a prompt as an input. We're going to say, hey, you know what, can you use this detailed market research and give me a high-level summary? And you attach the report. Now, we see some stuff here. I'm not going to expect you to read all that's on there. It just gives you some ideas of it takes this maybe 200-page report, condenses it down into something consumable. Now, I challenge you to think about that and say, well, okay, but I still have to spend a bunch of time reading that. If I'm a business decision maker, I want somebody to tell me. Just give me the answer. All right, so we could actually tune our prompt even more. And we could tell our prompt, oh, and answer these questions for me, and put it in this format, right? So we can enhance, we can improve on this. This is our starting point. All right, content summarization, business process. Oh, okay, so let's get into our content creation. Well, how about that? Write a product description. All right, I said I'm not very creative, so how would I word that? I'm not very wordsmithy. I don't know how to write this in a, appealing way to my target market, right? So we can give it a prompt. All right, so this is for walking around London. I'll be honest, I've never been to London yet, so I don't know. I think it might be in my mindset. Maybe we need something that's comfortable, right? So, but if you're a London walker walking around in London, you might need something specific. So we're giving it a little bit of context, and we're telling it a little bit of what to do. It creates us an output. All right, so great. Now we got an idea of how we're going to position this with our customers' website content. Disclaimer alert, do not use that output directly. Use that output as a starting point, and then tune it, hone it with the personal touch of, well, the expertise of the staff you have. But it gives you a huge jumpstart. All right, I'm not going to spend any time with the code generation, but the other side with the content generation is imagery, right? If we need to create an image to put on that website, well, we could take a photo of a shoe that we already have. Maybe it's got some other things. What does that look like? A battery in there? Okay, so we got a shoe, but we want that shoe to look like it's over a skyline. It's sitting out of an apartment terrace or something, and we want to make it look like, hey, this shoe belongs in London. I don't know, maybe, yeah, that looks like perfect. Yeah, so again, it's a starting point. May not be exactly what you want to do, but it helps with the creativity aspect of things. So it gets you a good starting point, and more importantly, you didn't actually have to hire out photographers, a site location, rent the location, get everything done, hope the weather works out for your shots. You were able to create this all electronically and quickly. All right, like I said, I'm not going to really spend any time with the code generation because, well, we already talked about it. All right, so let's get right into our questions and answers. No, I'm sorry, I'm not taking questions and answers for this session, but I will be around afterwards if you want to talk to me about some of these things. No, I mean your customers might want to interact with you, your business, and you want to be able to answer them 24/7, but you don't want to have somebody actually there all the time awake, right? So what if our customers want to ask us, hey, could you tell me a little bit more about my last order? I can't find my tracking number. Notice in that prompt, the prompt doesn't really tell us much. The context needs to be understood, right? Hello, I need assistance. Who's I? Well, hopefully we know the context of the user through whatever methodology. Maybe it was the phone number that they used to dial in. Maybe whatever, and we can find it through our CRM systems. But, tracking number. We could have a phone center agent doing that, but it's a busy work process. If we can automate that and provide the response in a very humanistic conversation, that now gives that customer's experience to be more positive rather than the robotic voice, your order number is, or your tracking number is. It just feels warmer. Yeah, I know I'm using those emotional words here, but yeah, that's what we want. We want that customer's experience to be a very positive one. Okay, so now we've talked about our 4 use cases. We've talked about applying those use cases into various different industry contexts. Now we've applied them into the shoe industry. Let's get techie. Yeah, all right. So I promise you we're not going to go super deep in tech, but we do have to talk tech. This is the time. All right, so we have already talked about what a machine learning model is. It takes a bunch of different data sets. It looks at patterns amongst those data sets, and it makes a prediction. And we kind of said generative AI can do that, but it does it at massive scale with unlabeled data, with data that it just doesn't know anything about, and it builds the context itself. All right, so let's dive a little deeper here. So that unlabeled data goes into a massive machine learning process. And yeah, it's using a neural network. It's trying to figure out for itself what is the context of that. So that whole process, you kind of notice it looks like a little bit of machine on one side and neural network and brain looking thing on the other side. It's basically, we're trying to figure this out from itself, from its own content. Massive process there. But we call that process pre-training. We'll talk just a little more about pre-training in a minute. And what is the result? An adaptation of all of that context to provide you valuable information from it. So that's your content summarization, your content generation, your code, your question and answer, those different pieces that we want for our business, we get that as an output from this process. All right, so foundational model. That foundational model is the piece that has been trained on massive corpus of data. So foundational models are trained on massive amounts of general domain data. That is our pre-training. Do you do the pre-training? No. Okay, no, because it can take months with massive amounts of compute power. So there are research organizations that do this. There's many different companies that do this with the large amounts of data that they have access to. And we consume those pre-made models. So let them take in all of that unlabeled data, let them run it through their algorithms, let it run through all this massive compute, and then they generate this thing called a foundational model. So the foundational model is the representation of what the machine has learned from all of that data that has been exposed to it. All right, so let's do this as an input. Input, prompt, synonymous. All right. A puppy is to a dog as a kitten is to a blank. Go ahead, shout it out. How did you guys know that it was a cat? Your neural network, your internal think, you're like, you just know it. You just know it. What about your computers? How do they know it? It's not like somebody programmed all these analogies in a decision tree. So, how would we use generative AI to do this? Right? This is not a complex problem. It really isn't. It seems very obvious, but when we think about this from a deterministic programming logical approach, it's not. It's just, hey, as humans, we just know it. All right, so a puppy is to a dog as a kitten is to a cat. All right, let's see, how would the machine figure this out? It does it by tokenization. All right, I told you we got to get technical. So here we talked about a foundational model. We talked about a prompt. Now that prompt is divided into tokens. No, these are not the tokens you put into the slot machines out here in the casinos. These tokens are ways that the machine learning model, that foundational model, interprets that chunk of data. All right, we've oversimplified this example, and we made each and every word look like a token. In the real world, approximately every 6 characters equals a token. And it doesn't actually have to cut off at a word either. Very interesting, but those feed into the model so that the model has a way to, well, turn it into numbers and interact with it, but it can also figure out things that it may not have heard of before. Because it's not using a dictionary. It's not using a lookup like we would think, right? Even if you used a dictionary for every one of these words, we wouldn't get the context. So we pass these tokens into the system. All right, that's pretty much as technical as we're going to get. But remember, what did machine learning do for us? Create predictions, right? So generative AI is using that prediction model, but to give us better context and conversations out of it. So we use this decoder. Well, what is the probability that the next word will be? Okay, now I told you earlier that I'm going to give you a little take-it-home exercise. Here it is. Please don't do this right now. I say it's a take-home. You don't have to literally go home. But when you finish this session, I'm going to ask you to do 2 things. One, go into your app, the reInvent app, rate this session. Let us know how we did on the session. But when you're there on your phone, open up a notepad, open up a text message. You don't even have to send this message to anybody. Just open up your text message. Start typing this. Now, if you know where I'm going with this, as you type A, P, U, your predictive text is going to start filling in the word puppy for you. Hey, is it reading your mind? Well, then you type is to a dog. As a kitten is, it's going to already want to fill in the sentence for you. Right? That's generative AI. We are using it every single day and not even realizing it. That predictive text is right in our smartphones. Okay? So that is just one example, very oversimplified, but I point that example out because a lot of times, especially business leaders, are hesitant to embrace generative AI, but yet we use it every single day and don't even realize it. Right? So this is where the rest of this session comes in to be a little bit more relevant. How do we do it responsibly? How do we put that into context for us? Right? Yeah, we knew it was a cat. All right, so let's plan that project. Let's put things together. Let's now determine how do we actually apply this generative AI in our business worlds. Well, 4 steps. Define the scope. Select the model. Adapt the model. Use the model. Define, select, adapt, use. Okay, so scope definition. We want to do that, right? Because if it's out of scope, we don't want to spend time with it. We want to have the right focus. So let's understand this. Define the scope. Great, we've got a flywheel, customer cost, revenue scope. Right, business decisions are made on return on investment. All right, I know, I love doing our cost finance classes. Okay, different story, different day. Sorry, I got off on a tangent. Return on investment is a decision we need to make as business leaders. So we need to predict roughly what the cost is to the value. So we're going to ask a couple questions. First of all, does our customer even want this? If a customer doesn't want it, why are you doing it? Just because it's cool? All right. Can we do it? Well, sometimes us technical geeks say, yeah, we can do it because it's just cool. But should you do it? All right. Just because you can doesn't always mean you should. Right? So we need to ask ourselves those questions before we even embark on this project. All right. And then define our scope to say, hey, is this something that's that easy win? Is this that low-hanging fruit? Again, we're already using predictive text in our text messages. Why not use predictive coding as a coding assistant? It's a very easy, low-impact lift. Or do we want something like a chatbot that we're going to have to, well, converse with our customers? And maybe we're a European company that needs to converse with our customers in multiple different languages, and we have an extra burden on that, right? So what is our scope? What does that look like for us, right? Which model do we want to use? Well, we talked about those foundational models. I didn't tell you about anything else from those foundational models, but we can fine-tune those models. We can contextualize that model. We can add a layer to that foundational model to give it the context of our business, our organizations, so that it's now making contextual decisions for us. Cool. All right, so adapting the model is fine-tuning, but it's also that prompt engineering. Remember when we did that business summary, when we looked at the analyst report? And I said we could change that prompt, and we can have the prompt actually give us some decisions. Hey, give me an evaluation on this and this, and give it to me in this format. We can improve what output just by changing our inputs. So prompt engineering. Well, that's like, search engine tuning. How do we search something? We spent time on how do I do a better search? Here, how do I write my prompt better so that this model gets me the output that I want in the format I want that's more valuable? That's the easiest low-lift approach. Fine-tuning, well, it is putting an extra layer over the existing model. All right, and then use that model, right? We need to use it. Sure, we've gone through all this problem. I'm going to tell you, we're going to evolve over time, and that is our adaptation in a way, right? But we're going to need to use it, which means we set it free. We let people use it, whether it be our programmers, whether it be our customers, we let people use it. Okay, so when you let people use it, remember I said some of the most important parts are coming towards the end? Now we're getting serious about this. First of all, how are we making sure we are responsible with our AI? How are we making sure that our AI is responsible? How are we getting appropriate feedback? Is a consumer of this AI able to give us feedback and say, hey, you know what? That answer wasn't very good. That was an incorrect answer, so that we can correct upon it. We need that feedback loop, right? How do we track that performance over time? Right? How do we track the business value as well, right? If we're improving productivity of a programmer, how do we actually quantify that? That's part of this, right? Can we augment our model? Right? We need to figure all those key pieces out. So seeing how this fits into your AI project, right? Again, the responsibility aspects. We want to make sure that our models are fair, right? We want to make sure that different inputs are treated equally. These models are trained on large bodies of data from all over the place, and it's very easy for unconscious bias to come into play. So we, as consumers of these models, have a responsibility to assure that our outputs are equitable. And if I'm not mistaken, Stefan's going to talk a little bit about that later. It's a very important thing. All right, privacy. Extremely important. Security, job zero everywhere. So anonymizing our data. We don't want to put personal information into the system, but we want to maybe anonymize it with some other reference. There's no reason to put personal information into the system. Sure, we can augment our other systems utilizing this, but we want to be very careful how we utilize personal protection, right? Personal data. All right, now risks. This is the part that is usually the blocker for everybody. Oh, we really can't adopt this because, generative AI hallucinates. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that from people. I am going to change that word. It makes mistakes, right? My daughter used to think a star was an uppa. She wasn't hallucinating. She wasn't doing mushrooms. No, she made a mistake because she hadn't learned it yet, right? So don't think of this hallucinations as a bad thing. Think of this as a feedback cycle that we need to use to improve the models, right? It happens, but how do we identify those? Toxicity is one of the things that, is very, very important because you've got a business. And if your user, your customer, puts something in the chatbot that, let's just say they use inappropriate language, and your chatbot says, this is the language structure that this person's using. I'm going to reply to them in a similar language. You don't want your business doing that. So you need to also sanitize what that is that's coming through the output before you present it to your customer. Just verify that it doesn't violate your business integrity standards. All right. Plagiarism, cheating, intellectual property in the training data, right? If we're using a lot of copywritten data into those corpuses and we didn't build the foundational model, what if that output is verbatim of a copywritten work and we present that as our own? Oops, we might be in legal trouble, right? So there are some extra things that we do need to take into consideration. Look, I'm not going into all of those things. I'm going to say, We need to be responsible consumers of this. As we are enabling our customers to have a better experience, we've got a responsibility here. All right, that last piece, I'm going to tell you, that touches me personally. I think it touches every one of us here, right? Disruption to the nature or work elimination, right? So I remember, I grew up in the States. I grew up in Michigan. I grew up in Michigan, Motor City, automotive industry. When robotics came to the assembly line, I remember how my father, my uncles, how everybody was worried about my job. What's going to happen to my job? Because, well, robots are taking over. It's the same thing here. Robots are taking over my thought work. They're not. We just need to do things a little differently. All right, so that's the disruption piece there. Let's get into just a couple more slides, and then I'm handing things over to Stefan here. Right, so how do you make sure your organization is ready? Start with your leaders. It needs to start at the top. We need to make sure that there is a agreement, the vision, a shared vision. Communicate that vision. Make sure that we train our employees and make sure that our employees are understanding and respectful of this is a business improvement. This is not something to eliminate jobs. This is something to help make things better overall. How do we make sure of that? Go through an organizational readiness approach. And yeah, so prepare your employees, we've already talked about there. So introduce that tool as a productivity helper for those employees, not a replacement for them. All right, and help with the retraining of how their job is changing in this world. All right, explain the new features. Maybe even make them involved in some of those asks. How can their job be better? All right, benefits, focus on the benefits. That's the whole reason we did it in the first place, right? Celebrate those wins that you're getting from it and right, make sure that it's known. We've done this and we've seen the results that we aimed for and here's how we know about it. All right, encourage your employees, plan for that, make sure you get their feedback and act upon their feedback. Keep that feedback cycle of your employees that are adopting this, keep that a real feedback. All right, so your organization, organizing for success, coordinate with experts in the field, people that have already walked the walk, see how they've done that. Make sure that your data quality and availability is on point. All right, governance model, there we go. Again, you are responsible to make sure that you are with your data ethically correct, responsible to it. Make sure you have transparency in what is happening. We don't see how the model took that corpus of data and turned it into things. But if we can be transparent in how we use that model, we can show what we're doing right. Make sure that you build in all of those ethical standards and controls. The governance is a very important piece of this. Just putting it out there, there is risk without putting the governance pieces in place. All right, so let's see about what can we do to take action now. Build business cases, educate your stakeholders, experiment with it. The experimentation is where you have low risk, right? Start with some things that aren't really impacting wide scale and show how generative AI can be part of what you're doing. Get a long-term strategy. How do we build from the small things? All right, get our generative AI thinking, start thinking about these become new tools. All right, and with that, Stefan, I'm sorry, I think I may have ran just a little bit over on my time, but glad to have you here talking about Canal Plus's journey. All right.
Scott.
All right.
So thank you and congrats for your nice jacket. So I'm sorry, I'm more traditional CTO of a big company, so I have a blue jacket. So I'm Stéphane Baumier, I'm the CTO, so the Chief Technology Officer of Canal Plus Group. As you can see, Canal Plus Group, it's a huge company, which has 27 million subscribers with a revenue of 6 billion. Why it's important? It's because we are a big company, and more than a big company, we are all company. We have created this company in 1984, so 40 years old. It means that we have legacy, we have P&L, we have a cyber challenge, we have many challenges, and so AI is beautiful, but when you are a CTO of this kind of company with 9,000 people who are working in the company, including 2,000 engineers and technical, how you can manage AI, because there is a lot of promise from a lot of people about revenue, about a lot of things. But the first thing that you have to do is to spend money. So how will we manage and how we can answer to this challenge? So first, to start 3 or 4 years ago, we create a strategic plan for the company to say, okay, how we manage the technology for Canal Plus Group. And in this strategic plan, we define what we would like to do with artificial intelligence. And we took the decision to create an AI factory. What does it mean, AI factory? It means that we would like to manage by ourselves the artificial intelligence and not just to buy something on shelves. And when we say this, there is one thing which is important to manage by ourselves, it's to train people. So the first thing that we do is to define the skills map that we need. So 2,000 engineers, so you can imagine how we manage it. We are not a startup, as I said before. So when we are not a startup, we cannot just find a tools, a very nice thing that you can find on all the boosts, and at the end to say, okay, I choose this one and change 6 months after, it's impossible. So when you have to do some choice. So we have to design a program. So we did it with AWS, with Elena who is here, and we defined a program for the teams. And the brand identity, it means how we train the people in regards of a media company like us, because with artificial intelligence and especially generative AI, we can do something on movies, on a CRM, and different things. So what we are going exactly to do. So we create a comprehensive training plan to be sure that we can have some concrete action. So we train 350 employees to AWS courses in all the domains. Architect, serverless, media streaming, data streaming, model language, security, sysops, FinOps, all the languages. Which is really important for us, of course, all the technical, but the FinOps for a company like a group like us, it's really important because, as you know, it's a transformation of the cost from fixed cost to variable cost because we are going to train a lot of requests. And from the FinOps, it's something that we need to manage to have a P&L, which is really good. We launched also the certification program for 100 employees of the company to be sure that on artificial intelligence, people are really involved and they really understand what they are going to do. And of course, different events and how to develop some generative AI. So when you have some people who are trained, so it's not a one step, it's on progress every year. We create some different animation to be sure that including the business and the technical are able to understand what we are going to do in terms of AI. So hackathon, which is really important to find some different solutions, what we are able to do, and from this to create the first generative AI cases. And the most important for us is the return of investment on these cases, because you can generate a lot of things, but at the end of the day, for the big companies like us, it's to create money and to create value. So after we start to see how we develop generative AI applications with some incubator, and we continue to train people to be sure that we're able to do. And more than technical, we would like that from, I think, next year, and we'll start a little bit this year, but more than next year, it's also to train people which are not technical, also to AI, to be sure that they understand all. For a lot of people in business, cloud means what they have on their smartphone is just a storage. So they have to understand what does it mean when we do exactly with cloud, what does it mean in compute, in processes, and how the cost model will change. If we go to some concrete use cases, in fact, we need to scale. As you have seen at the beginning, we are a worldwide company, so it must work in Vietnam, in Africa, in Europe. And for this, we need to have a scale application. So we leverage with AWS services this scaling application. So we have 3 use cases. 2 are already on production, so it means that it works. It's not just a promise that we can do to say, if you do this, it will be good, and you will see in the future it will work. But we can earn a lot of things. It's a generative quality, so I will focus on it. A chatbot for the digitalization of the customer relation, and the content monetization. It's 3 different cases, which is really important, because the first one is something which is a regulation. So gender equality can be for sure to see the balance between male and women in the different series movie, but also in political, if you would like to know how long each party speak on TV. So you can manage a lot of things. For chatbot, it's more to answer to a use case from the business, so how to limit the number of calls and how to have automatic answer. And monetization of the content, you will see, it's just the beginning. We create a technical platform in the AI factory to be able to answer to some use case, advertising, for example, or different metadata for this. Of course, we use AWS technology backbone with Bedrock and Amazon Recognition for one part. For the gender equality, the target of this is to be able, on movies and series or on live, to identify who is speaking and about what people are speaking. So we use AWS recognition for the video part, so we are able to know if it's a male or a female who is speaking. And for the audio, we use open source, which is a convolutional neural network. So it's a French one. I'm French, you can see, you know with my accent. But it's a French algorithm, an open source one that you can use. And from this, we are able to know who is speaking and about what. And it works in the reality. We use it, for example, we have a news channel. And for these new channels, we are able to identify who is speaking and to give some political quota or ratio of speaking on TV. And just to give you a result, if it works, yes. Sorry, wrong button, Yes. So for example, La Fièvre, which is a French series, we are able to say that 47% of the global speaking time is for female, and you have on screen 47% time of female on screen. So it's really important for the balance that we would like to do for our ESG, like a lot of big companies, we have ESG, to manage if we have a balance. And as soon as we are able to do for female and male, we are able to do for anybody in any series, any movie. So we are able to do all. And we have some statistics, and after you can provide. So it's a concrete case that is working, which is already on production. The second one, it's a chatbot. It's totally different because the chatbot is working in 7 companies for us across 52 countries. So it means that it works in different languages, in Polish, in French, in Vietnamese, in German, in different languages. We use microservices to manage this, and powered by Bedrock, we have some different things to receive the request. We did the vectorization of our different database for the support. We put it in our AI factory, and we are able to answer to any questions. Of course, we put some fine-tuning model to be sure that we answer only on the question that we would like to answer, because you can imagine that you can ask any question, and if we just pick up an answer in the database, it will be complicated. Why we did this? Because, in fact, this is the first brick of the AI factory. So it means that we took the support database, we vectorize it, so we are able to answer from this database. But tomorrow we can put the programs, content, we can put all the data, the technical information about the set-top box, for example, about the TV or anything, and we just have to push it in the database, and it works alone, without anything. So it's totally scalable, it works, it's already on production, we use it on our different websites. We integrate it in the Genesis solution, if you know Genesis, for the different customer care relationship. And for the moment, it's really a good success. So we add more and more answers to the different questions. So it's very easy for us to manage. It's a big work for the team. It's why we train them before, because we have to imagine all the different solutions. And as I said before, the different challenges are the cyber part, how we manage on a day-to-day basis, because as a presentation before, we can do a lot of things, but when you manage a company who broadcasts some TV channels, you can imagine it's 24 hours per day and 7 days per week. So the chatbot must work every day, night or day, in regards of the countries where we are. So we have also to manage all the people who are going to do the duty and to be on call for any issue. And the last one, it's how we manage the content intelligence. So it means we are a media company. So we have a lot of video, we have a lot of clip, we have a lot of spotlight, we have many things. So we have 2 solutions. One solution is to bring all the video, to bring it in another company, and they will generate metadata for us, and we can use the metadata for advertising, to analyze the different things, the social engagement, the environmental impact, and this kind of thing. But if we do this, it means that we lose a part of the data. It means we bring the data to someone who can sell it, who can distribute it, and because it's a young technology, we don't want to take any risk. So for the moment, we have some use case, but the ROI is not really clear. So what we do, it's first the technical or the technology, is it really realistic to do this kind of thing? So we start to do some tests on it. So we took a content. We use the different Bedrock, Amazon, and all the different applications that you can see here to be able to analyze each scene and to be able to see what's happened in the scene. And when we do this, we are able to have the scene and to say there is a table, there is a chair, there is a bottle, there is a TV. The TV is, there is someone in the sofa, this guy is watching for a movie, and the movie is about the war or romantic movie or anything. So we are able to generate all the metadata. So for a company like Canal+, what we do is to do a reporting on all of this and to propose to the business to say, okay, now we are able to do all of this. So what do we want to do with this? Very different solution. It can be for environmental impact. So it means how many, for example, movies speak about ecology. It can be one. Another one can be for advertising. Do you want to know all the car, for example, Ford? We are able to say all the cars which are the brand from Ford are on all this movie. Do you want to insert some advertising for Ford in this car? So you can sell advertising. And for all of this, they can define some ROI. And at this moment, we will be able to apply, in fact, this metadata generation, because you can imagine when that you have 1,000 movies. If we generate metadata on all these movies, the cost will be how can I say this, very important, and we absolutely need to know if there is a good reason to do it, and the reason is the revenue and the value. So we absolutely need to know the ROI before to put all the movie and all the series in this kind of generative AI and to generate the metadata. So it's really a work between business use cases and technical. So it means that you have to do some POC to see if you are able to generate metadata, to propose to the business to see what they can do with this metadata. And when they are ready to find a business case with this metadata, we can do something more industrial and to say now we can put 1,000 and 1,000 movies to generate metadata. So I think it's the last slide. Yeah. So to summarize, in fact, the challenge is that from the top management of all the big company, there is a request to go to AI and generative AI. So when you are a CTO of a company and a media company, you have to know exactly where you would like to go and at which cost. The OPEX cost can increase very, very, very fast because you have many cases. It can be very interesting to generate picture, to generate movie. I receive, I think every week, someone who come to see me to say, okay, we are able to generate automatic movie with generative AI. But for the moment, there is many challenges, the regulation, the cyber, and how we manage on a day-to-day basis to be sure that it works with the production environment that we have since 40 years. So it's why we start by something which is very basic. It's a strategic plan. We define that we would like to have an AI factory inside the company managed by the team. So we decided 3 years ago to do a long training for the team to be sure that we are able to understand exactly what we do and to be sure that we can manage it by ourselves. And the last thing is to find the clear use case from the business, like the chatbot, the gender equality from the regulation, and the last one, we are able to generate metadata, so how we can find now business cases. So you see, we start to change from business case to technical case to go to the business. So I think it's a little bit quick and fast, but if you have any question, I think you can find my email. I will be happy to answer. I hope it's more concrete about all what you can see, so thank you very much.